All righty, let's see, audio is going. All right, so I'm gonna make a quick video for you all for from Monday's class. We talked about vehicle searches and we also got an open fields, plain view, those types of things. And we talked about some stuff, so I'll move pretty fast. Let's see here. If I seem a little less than sharp, yeah, last night was my night with my daughter, so I went to bed at 7 this morning. It's like, that's good. That's kind of normal baby stuff. All right, so things we need to talk about. Probably the three most important cases. I think I referenced them whenever I talked a little about the essay, one of the potential essays for the exam that deals with see, Belton, Thornton, and Gant. So that when we start talking about vehicle searches, those are some of the three of the big cases. There's more than just those three, but in terms of how a search can be conducted in a vehicle, the areas you can access, and when you are limited from actually conducting a vehicular search. So Belton and Thornton, basically what they dealt with is, yes, you can search the whole passenger compartment, you can search the glove box, the it's got a center console, the trunk, those types of things. Gant, if I remember correctly, it was the one where a person was arrested, but they weren't within arm's reach of the vehicle. They didn't have anything to do with the vehicle at all. And so the search of the vehicle incident to that arrest is not one that stood up in court. There has to be some way that it attaches to that arrest or that incident. And those things we kind of talked a little about before. What else do I want to tell you about that? Things that were unresolved. When it comes to things that haven't clearly been identified as to whether or not they're allowable or not, basically, whenever you search a vehicle, if you've got probable cause for some type of item in it, you can search anywhere that there's a reasonable, could reasonably hold the item that you're looking for, right? And so if you're looking for drugs or something of that nature, you see the person intoxicated or there have been other, reasons, indicators that person is trafficking in drugs. You could look in basically anything. The case that first started with that one, I think it was Belton, basically was a drug stop where the person was given permission to search a vehicle. And as the officer searching the vehicle, he came across an envelope that had super gold written on it. And this was like I want to say it's the 70s. And that was a term for drugs, marijuana. And sees that on there. It's like, okay, so it's clearly labeled as that. So it's reasonable to conclude that, hey, this is probably where the drugs are. And as soon as he opened it up, of course, that was challenged in court, went all the way to Supreme Court, saying that, that went beyond the scope of that consent. It's like, no, it didn't. It could reasonably hold that. Where you start getting into murky territory is it something that's locked separately and inaccessible to that person, like for example, locked glove box, something like that. That person can unlock the glove box if they turn off the key, take the key and unlock it. But really, if what you'd want there is if you're doing consent search, of course, you'd want to have a separate consent just for that. Likewise, if you had like luggage in the trunk or something of that nature, it's like, your probable cause to search the vehicle may not extend to that. And typically when you start talking about luggage, it's one of the things that starts getting closer to the person themselves. So you have a little bit more protection there. So you'd want to either, have probable cause for that specifically or consent specifically related to that type of item. Whenever you have a vehicular stop, I talked about this one before spring break. Basically everyone in the vehicle is seized, right? So the passenger's front, back seat, everyone is seized. No one's free to leave at that point in time if there's a stop that takes place. The things you can do, you can order the driver or the passenger out of the vehicle. You can ask questions of the driver, anyone there, within the vehicle themselves. You can ask for all the state regulated information, driver's license, insurance, vehicle registration, all those types of things. You can locate the vehicle identification number, those types of things. Just standard things associated with regulation. Anything that's in plain view, of course, if it's a legal stop, we'll talk more about plain view here in a second. if you are in the process of that stop, you develop probable cause. Of course, at that point, you're authorized to do whatever that probable cause relates to, whether it's arrest the person or search the vehicle, I should say, and or search the vehicle. You can search belongings if you have, and it wouldn't matter whose. If you have probable cause for the vehicles, it doesn't matter whose stuff it is in that vehicle. It's there's probable cause for that vehicle, which is interesting because then you start looking at ownership. Who say you find drugs in the floorboard of the vehicle. Who's it belong to? Is it the drivers? Is it the passengers? Is it can they say that no one knew it was there, and then you have to let them go? And usually have a little bit of fun with that kind of conversation in class. And typically what you look for is you look for it to be reasonably associated with somebody. If you can't tie it to anybody and everyone's in the vehicle, you can arrest everybody. Basically, it's just, would it be reasonably that everyone was aware of that kind of thing. But yeah, you're authorized to just round everybody up. And, all right, we're all going down to the station, and then eventually somebody will probably point a finger at somebody and like that kind of thing. Let's see. While we're talking about that, kind of relate it back to that a little bit when we're talking about people and their belongings. If you have probable cause that's associated with something, let's say I have this little thing here. Let's say it's just filled with drugs of some sort. Let's say I don't know, pick your poison. Right, literally drugs. So that's filled with drugs. I take it and I throw it in the trunk of my vehicle and I hop in. The way probable cause works, like if normally what you do is you develop probable cause, search the vehicle, and you search the whole vehicle and try to identify where it's at. If you have an idea of where it's at already, the probable cause extends to the whole vehicle. So it's not something where you just have to find that one thing. It's like, no, you search the whole vehicle. You're looking for this. You have a good idea of where it is, but it expands out from there, to whatever would reasonably hold that kind of thing. Of course, if you find it, you get it, and it has drugs in it, you got probable cause to go through the rest of the vehicle as detailed as you want to. Case that dealt with that. Trying to remember exactly how that one went. Basically, it's something like if you have a satchel of drugs, you throw it in the back of the vehicle, authorized to stop and search that entire vehicle because that's the way probable cause works. Other things you can do to people who are stopped in vehicle stop: breathalyzer of the driver. You can request that. One of the more interesting questions is what happens if you refuse. That may come up again a little bit. The book will probably get into it whenever we get into confessions. Typically, the way state statutes are written, I think all of them are written this way, is that you consent to those by using the roadways. If you refuse to, they are treated as a failed test. So as soon as you decline to take it, you're done. You're getting a DUI. So that's the way that works. It's something they request it. It's required. You have to do it. About the only thing that gives you a little bit of leeway is there's usually some time you can ask for, and it's not a whole lot of time. I think maybe maximum 30 minutes kind of thing. And the reason why they do that is like if someone like literally just left a bar, only had one beer, which still has alcohol in their mouth, or let's say it's a shot of whiskey out the door. It's like what is their alcohol level, and also be aware of the fact that alcohol is something that's processed at a certain rate. So if you were drinking heavily, waiting 30 minutes isn't going to help you. It's actually going to make it worse, because what will happen is you have that stop, and when you were drinking, you drank so much, your body's going to take time for it to start processing that. So as it's taking that time, your alcohol level is actually going to increase for a period of time before it starts to your body starts to work that poison out, basically. All right. Let's see. Search based on consent. We already talked a little bit about that. So arrests for non-jailable offenses. We talked about that one last. It was before spring break. That was a case where a person got pulled over for failing to wear a seatbelt and had kids in the vehicle, and she got arrested. It's like that's non-jailable offense. That's very low level. Citations, typically what you're talking about there, but you still have that authority to do that. We talked about that already. Okay. You don't have to notify people that they're free to leave. Pull them over for a minor citation, something like that. before you ask for consent to search a vehicle. You don't have to indicate to them that they have the ability to decline it. This is different from the Fifth Amendment and Sixth Amendment rights, where those you do have to notify someone after a certain stage. Here, you don't have to do that at all. You don't have to tell them that you're just being here is now consensual. It's well, if you hold up a minute, let me ask you, can I search your vehicle? And that's the way that works. Pretext stops. That's where you stop someone for a legitimate reason, but the real reason you're doing it is not for that reason, it's for something else. The case that dealt with that, what it was is a couple of ICE officers. I don't even think that they were in uniform at the time. I can't remember that aspect of it. Basically, they were sitting in an area where they were at a stop. They could see a stop sign, they saw a vehicle, pull up to the stop sign, stop there, and the drivers and the car's full of people, and the driver's looking in his lap, or someone's in the vehicle's looking in their lap and taking a really long time before they take off. And so finally they take off and they don't signal. And so it's with that, they're thinking, it's like, okay, what's he looking at down in his lap? And probably drugs. He's probably, rolling up a joint or something like that. Well, let's go pull him over because we have authority to do that. And that's the way it is it doesn't matter the true intent for an officer for making a stop, so long as they have the legal authority to do so, they can do that. That's called a pretext stop. Okay. Let's see, roadblocks, things we need to talk about. Roadblocks. There are a few reasons why you can have them, and one particular one why you can't. So roadblocks operate a little bit differently than your standard stop, since the detention there is so brief. I mean, you're talking about seconds before you send someone off, that they're allowed to happen so long as they advance legitimate government interest. You're talking about things like drunk driving, gathering information, that kind of stuff. Of course, you also have the border searches and for illegal immigration within a certain distance of the nation's borders. So those are the legitimate reasons. Everyone's seen probably drunk driving. You probably haven't seen ones that have dealt with information. The case that dealt with that, what happened, there was a hit and run driver. I think the person who was hit died. And so what they did is they set up a roadblock, same road, same time, day, I think even day of the week. And so they were stopping vehicles, asking if they traveled that road that week and if they had any information, they'd seen anything. While they were doing that, someone came busting through there drunk and caused an accident at that point in time, of course. It's like, there you go. I think you probably found the guy, but I can't remember if that was the guy. I just have another crime you're dealing with. The way things go, I'd wager, yes, that probably is the same person. The reason why you can't do one is to detect ordinary criminal wrongdoing. So just to detect crime itself is not an acceptable reason to set up a roadblock. The case that dealt with that, basically what they're doing is they're trying to set up roadblocks to deal with drugs, that kind of thing. It's like, no, that's not the same as drunk driving or the other reasons. So, whenever you talk about the border, basically you have no expectation of privacy. The way that works is, you're crossing international borders. They don't need any suspicion, they don't need anything. And the level of intrusion that can go is quite deep. In terms of like vehicles and that kind of thing, they can fully disassemble your vehicle. The leading case for that, basically, that's what happened is they were checking on the vehicle. They noticed that the gas tank sounded solid. It's like, okay, drop it and open it up. And they found a whole bunch of drugs. And I was like, yeah, there you go. You're going to jail and you're going to be charged and go to prison. One of the things you commonly see jokes about are like, cavity searches, that kind of thing at the border. It's like, they don't do that unless they have a specific reason to do that. And that's something I've developed a little bit more. Now, the same thing with roadblocks in general is the detention itself is very, very, very brief. You're talking about a matter of a few seconds, unless they develop an individualized suspicion that there's something going on. Like as they're talking to you, that you're slurring your words, smell alcohol, that kind of thing. Like, yeah, you pull over there, we're going to investigate that further. And that's how that works. Okay. Let's see, there's a section about vehicle searches. The automobile exception to the warrant requirement has largely to do with the fact that it's mobile. It's not going to stay in any one jurisdiction. So getting a warrant for it's going to be very difficult when it can be several counties over by the time you get one. So mobility, the diminished expectation of privacy. You're using it on public roads. Those are things that aren't yours. It's used as as transportation. Let's see, automobiles are highly regulated. And the book says cars' occupants and contents are in plain view. This is true. And has a section here that says car used for transportation, not as a residence. That relates more to RVs. So the case that dealt with that, I can't remember if the book goes into that into too much detail, but basically what happened was you had a guy who was in an RV and it was set up to where he could just get up and go. It's not like anything like trailer parks where tires are flat, it's on a foundation or something like that, where it's no longer mobile. That's a home. This would be like tires are ready to go. It could be hitched up and gone in a second kind of thing, not literal second, but you know what I mean. But guy was in one of those, and what he was doing was he was exchanging drugs for sex with underage boys. And so police became aware of that and went and investigated and got the guy. And that was a question of, well, this is his home. You didn't have a warrant for it when you made this arrest. When you entered the home, when you found the drugs and all such. Yeah, it's a vehicle. It's like you don't get that level of protection. When it comes to residences in general, typically the rule is, are you an overnight, are you staying overnight? Is it a place where you sleep? It's sort of like when you look at apartments. I can get I don't think there are any around here, but let's say back in Little Rock or I'm sure in Tulsa or any areas nearby, there are hotels you can get that are rent by the hour. I haven't figured out what they only need them for the hour for, but it's like, yeah, you're not an overnight visitor there. You don't have that extra protection there. And even if you do, let's say it's an apartment that you fully rent on like a monthly basis, are you actually sleeping there or not? Because it's there's a case where a person was doing that, but they were using that apartment as a facility to basically bring in drugs, divvy them up, and then send them out so that way they can be sold on the streets. And so person was going in there, actually a couple people were going in there. Officer kind of paying attention, kind of looked in the window, could see a little bit what was going on. And I think we got one of the people when they were coming out, searched them, found drugs, and just went right in. I was like, I got probable cause for it. I don't need to get a warrant. I'm just going straight in because they don't live there. That's just like a room kind of thing, not a home. All right. Objective reasonableness is the rule of vehicle searches. Yes, you need to look in places that can reasonably hold the items that you're looking for. Automatic searches during traffic citations are unconstitutional. That's an Iowa case where they tried to pass a law that would cause basically upon any type of citation, your vehicle would be searched. It's like that's vague and overly, it's at least overly broad. And so that's not something that we can do. We already talked about searching passenger compartments, containers, trunks, that kind of stuff. I guess it was Dalton Thornton was the one about arrest the person who's not in the vehicle. Gant was, what one was Gant? That's gonna drive me crazy because I won't remember it till I look it up again. It's been a while since I looked at that case, those cases. Those are the three probably the biggest, at least to me, in relation to vehicle searches. Let's see. Vehicle searches and issues. So if you search a vehicle, so I think we talked a little bit about inventory searches when we were talking about arresting people. Let's say the person's carrying a backpack. Police can take that backpack, and then if they've got policies about inventory searches, basically they'll go through the backpack and search at that point in time that they take a person in. They'll search it probably on the scene too, but again, when they take it in. The reason they do that, there's a few different reasons. One's for identification, that you know who you're dealing with. 2, officer protection, public protection, that kind of thing. 3, protection against false claims. That hey, I had 3 gold bars in here. I had what would that be? Each gold bar weighs like 40 pounds, something like. Yeah, I had that in there. I swear I did. Yeah, it's not here on the inventory. And I want to say there's another reason as well. But the same kind of purpose applies to vehicles. That it's there to protect the department, to protect the person who's being arrested, whose property it is, and the persons who, the public, police officers themselves as well. And so the question becomes is if that vehicle is in police possession and they do a search, is there any time limitations there? Because usually search incident to an arrest are right there on the scene. Typically, it doesn't make any difference if it's on the scene or later. What you start looking for is if it's determined that the delay in that search is unreasonable, that's something that the defense has to prove, and not the police. I mean, it would be something like the effect of, well, I've been out I was released from custody, a couple of days ago, and it's been almost a week since you had my vehicle and you haven't given it back yet, and you just searched it today. It's like that then you start running into that argument of, that's kind of an unreasonable delay and that kind of thing. Otherwise, it makes no difference. I mean, for example, it's not uncommon. One of the cases that dealt with this, what happened was the person was still in the jail cell while they were, awaiting, I guess, hearing stuff. Those first stages. Police decided to take a closer look at the vehicle and they found drugs in it. And this, a couple of days had passed. Person's still in police custody, and they tried to argue that delay was unreasonable. It's like it made no functional difference whether we searched on the scene or here because you've just been sitting in the jail cell. Let's see. Let's talk about mobile homes, vehicles found in public places. You start looking at abandonment. And are they abandoned? And that's what you're dealing with there. Here, hold on 1 second. All right, I'm back. Let's see here. So I need to talk about electronic devices to monitor vehicles. So the basic rule is if you're within eyesight of a public road, that kind of thing, or you're on the public road, having a device that monitors your location makes absolutely no difference. It's no different than an officer just tailing you, quarter mile back kind of thing, or maybe less distance than that. So one of the things to be aware of as it relates to a lot of the cases in the textbook are those are cases that are decades old, so the technology was a bit older. Typically, you're talking about like radio frequency. You're looking at signal strength and general direction is basically how you try to figure out where it's at. Well, signal's relatively weak. It's in this direction, so I think it's about this distance, and I can go find it. And that was a general principle behind LoJack, if you ever heard of it. Now we're talking about GPS stuff, so you get that much more refined. You're talking about fractions of an inch in terms of accuracy of location. Where you run into difficulties is when you cross over into protected areas. So if you have some vehicle that you're tracking, let's say it's just pulled up in somebody's driveway, that kind of thing. It's like, that's fine. You can still see that. Pulls into a garage that's attached to the house or something like that, starts passing into the home. That's where you start running into trouble. And the leading case in that area dealt with that. It was they were tracking a vehicle and it moved into a protected location, at which point in time they were trying to get probable cause for search on the locations, and that one got thrown out because it's like, you went too far in the home. Technology is an interesting thing. We're talking about searches and that kind of thing. I think the next chapter kind of mentions it a little bit. Anytime that you're trying to figure out what's going on inside of a home using technology, you're violating the protections of that home. There's a case that's really interesting to read it, but it was dealing with, I swear, I think it was from California, but I might be wrong. I was from early 2000s. And basically what happened was they were trying to identify homes that were not really homes, but they're functioning as marijuana growing farms. And so, you look at, how fast is the meter going? This was going really, really fast. It's like, okay, that's a good indication. They got a lot of lights on, they got heat going and that kind of thing. And what an officer did is they pulled out a temperature gauge and pointed at the side of the house. And that house read hotter than all of the rest. And rightly so, because it was a growing operation. But because they used that in securing the warrant for it, it ended up being voided out because the technology there was used to determine aspects of the home that you could only identify by physically being in the home. So you used something that is functionally similar to just going ahead and entering the home, that kind of thing. Last thing I should mention, I just saw a little thing here about it. Department policies. Particularly when it comes to inventory searches, they kind of stress this in the book is make sure your department has one. Just about all do, because if you don't have an inventory search policy, you can't do one. There's nothing to guide or govern your use of it. And so what will happen is if you don't have, when you find something, it'll be thrown out. So you want to make sure you always have it. Next section, plain view, open fields, abandonment, border searches. We already talked about borders. We'll skip that. Plain view. So plain view is just sight alone. That's all you can use. You have to be able to tell that it must be immediately apparent that the item is seizable, that it's some type of contraband or stolen good or something of that nature. So it says requirements for the doctor: awareness of the item through sight, recognition of the item, location of the officer. That should be all. Location is the most important thing, that you're at a location you're legally allowed to be. So if you've made an invalid stop, you're not in the location you're legally allowed to be. You entered in someone's home without reason to, without a warrant, you're not, you can't do that. However, if you're walking down the sidewalk and all of a sudden you kind of glance into a vehicle and you see a big brick of marijuana sitting there, you can go after. That's plain view. It's like readily apparent. Historically, if you look at the development of the plain view, it started out as an accident. A vehicle got pulled over, the officer ordered the person out of the vehicle, and when he did, he saw, I think it was drugs in the seat, that kind of thing. And so for a long time, inadvertence was one of the requirements to it, but that one dropped out on subsequent cases because basically what happened is an officer had a suspicion, the person had something, so had a good reason to pull the person over. And in doing so, you can take a look at the vehicle and, hey, there you go, you got it. So I knew what I was looking for, and I just had to confirm it, and this is the way I went about it. That's legitimate use of it too. Okay. It's a situation where the doctor implies when making an arrest without a warrant, hot pursuit, search incident to arrest, out on patrol, car inventory search, investigations of the residence. Okay. So plain view, you're typically looking in things, in places. It's inside, it's sight only. Open fields is different. Of course, you're talking about an open field, or otherwise place that's no one real has a real possessory interest of. I guess it's a good way of looking at it. I'll explain that in a second. But you can use all of your senses. You can reach up, you can touch things, all that kind of stuff. Being that this is more rural area, what I would ask if we were in class is how many of you have seen a no trespassing sign on someone's property? And does that mean the police can't trespass? Like, yeah, and it doesn't affect police at all. Yeah, you can have someone, banned from the property, that kind of thing. But when it comes to police, it doesn't really matter. I've heard of people I knew who lived on a farm, had a barn, and it was probably good. I'd say probably 2 football fields from their house. So, in terms of farm properties, that's not very far at all. Like go out there and in the middle of the night, they look outside and they see a whole bunch of flashlights inside their vehicle, inside their barn, just looking around and all that kind of stuff. What the hell? Starts to go outside and then notices, oh, there's a whole bunch of police vehicles out there. And it's like, yeah. The no trespassing signs, fences, those types of things don't necessarily mean that it's a protected location. To know whether it's a protected location outside, it needs to be considered part of the curtilage. There's 4 factors that go into determining whether an area is curtilage. It's 1, proximity to the home. 2, is it like fenced in or enclosed with the home. 3, what steps are taken to conceal it from the public. And 4, what are the nature of its use? What is the nature of its use? And using those 4 guidelines, well, you should say factors, not really guidelines. You don't have guidelines for any of those things. Just those 4 factors, you make that determination. There's no specific distance that says this is or this isn't, part of the curtilage or whether or not you have a fence or not. It's like that doesn't ultimately make a difference. It's all of those factors together. A good example would be like trash. It's like, the trash up next to your house is protected. The police can't go to it. You wheel it out to the street for pickup. It's no longer up next to your house in the curtilage. Yes. And you also abandoned it out in a public area. So it's, they can go after it at that point. Let's see. Ooh, something else I didn't mention. Mechanical devices. So if we're talking about plain view, think like binoculars, technology, scanning devices, those types of things. Like it's still considered plain view. You can fly an airplane overhead and use high resolution imagery and take pictures of someone's property, and that's still considered plain view. So it doesn't really matter until you move into you're trying to violate the sanctity of someone's home kind of thing. Plain touch, we talked about when we were talking about frisking, is, if it becomes immediately apparent what something is when you pat somebody down, you got probable cause to move into it. I'd also mention your plain odor. Could that stand up? Yes. I would never recommend anyone ever conduct any type of search related to, I smell something, right? You remember your justifications are additive. You want to have many things. If you're relying just on that one, it's like you're really pushing the boundaries, and in some ways you could be asking for a different type of trouble than what officers typically have to deal with in the line of their duty. So it's like you want to be able to verify more than just, it's like I smell marijuana. Well, maybe you do, maybe you don't. Maybe there's a skunk, 20 yards up the road, and that's kind of direction blowing the winds coming right this way. Here.
To see it.
All right.
Wave goodbye.
All right. Well, I'll see you later.
All right, don't worry about it. Is everything okay?
Yeah. Just making a video for the class where my computer crashed on Monday.
I thought you were talking at a conference or something.
No, don't. I'm just making a recording.
Just recording
Yeah.
a deal.
All righty. So that basically covers open fields. Anything else I need to talk about that? Talk about aerial surveillance already. Where it ends and where open fields begins is not always clearly defined. Something you have to weigh at every individual case. Abandonment. So basically, that's whenever you give up something without limitation. So you've probably, if you've ever watched any cop shows, you'll see something where let's say a wallet is found as a police chase is taking place. And, is this your wallet? And they catch the guy. No, that's not my wallet. Okay, at that point in time, it's abandoned. So I can look in it and make a determination as to whose it is and what's in it and that kind of stuff. And so abandonment is a very interesting thing, because since it no longer belongs to anyone, it no longer has that reasonable expectation of privacy. So if it's left in an open area, public place, that kind of thing, the main, so two things to look at: where it's at, and did someone have the intent to abandon it? And if so, feel free to search. Like in terms of like police chases, you see drugs flying out the window of a car, someone's tossing stuff. It's like that point in time, you have that intent there. That's the intent to abandon those things. So you can go get them. Like if it was a locked backpack or something like that, it's like, yeah, you can open that puppy up. It's like whatever it is, it's like you have no possessory interest in it because you got rid of it. So plain view and abandon, so it's like you can go right after it. When you start thinking about vehicles, you probably see on the road broken down vehicles with a little tag on them to indicate that, hey, you have so long to take care of this vehicle. That timeline is what they're looking at. It's like, after this point in time, we're going to consider this abandoned. We're going to take possession of it. And that's typically what you're doing with abandonment. Keep in mind that police actions and how they affect abandonment and how they can affect abandonment. So if it's something that you've caused someone to abandon, it might not be considered abandoned. Maybe that maybe as a result of police actions, but typically you can establish that the person's intent was to abandon it. And you can do that pretty easily just by asking, "Is this yours?" Because denial of ownership is abandonment. Border searches, I think I talked about those things already. That popped up here again. Strip search, body searches, x-rays, anal cavities, alimentary canals, all that good stuff. I'll let you guys read that and we'll cut that there. If you have any questions, you want me to go into more detail about anything, just let me know. With that, I'm going to cut this video short and post it up online as soon as I can. You all take care and have a great day, and I will see you on Monday. Bye.